Chinese warship sailed dangerously close to an American destroyer in the Strait of Taiwan. The incident was captured exclusively by Global News on board HMCS Montreal. It was sailing behind the American ship as part of a joint mission in the South China Sea. At a defense summit in Singapore, Defense Minister Anita Anand says Canada and its allies won't be deterred by China's acts of provocation.
Canada will continue to sail where international law allows, including the Strait, the South China Sea, and really our overall goal is to increase the peace and stability of this region.
Joining me now is retired Vice Admiral Mark Norman, the former commander of the Royal Canadian Navy and currently a fellow with the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. Admiral Norman, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Mercedes, and thanks for taking an interest in this really important and interesting development.
Well, some really remarkable video that we were able to capture on board the ship. Our Mackenzie Gray is reporting from the ship. He saw this all go down. They shot it and filmed it. I'd like to ask you to take our viewers through what you see happening here.
Certainly. So we start the video with two ships in the shot. The one to the right is the American destroyer, and the Montreal obviously is directly astern. I'd say about a kilometer behind the ship. And we see the Chinese ship entering from the left of the screen at significant speed, I would add. I'm estimating she's probably doing well over 20 knots, so about 40 kilometers an hour, and crosses dangerously close directly ahead of the American destroyer. So this is a clearly provocative and arguably unprofessional event. And I would say that the Chinese captain knew exactly what he was doing. This was not an accident.
We hear the terms unsafe and unprofessional often from the military, but you would describe this as dangerous. Can you explain to us how close they would be and why that's dangerous when you're at sea?
Yeah, so based on the reporting, it appears that they passed within about 150 yards, 100 meters or so. And we put it in a couple of perspectives for your viewers. First of all, the ships themselves are about that long. So when you think about 100 meters, you think of a football stadium or something like that, but then you realize that the ship itself is bigger than that. And so you're inside the length. So imagine you're driving down the 417 in traffic and somebody cuts right in front of you, and they do it not just because they're being irresponsible. They do it because they're trying to send you a message. And this is the kind of, we'd call it dangerous driving if it was on the highway, and this is exactly what we're seeing. And sadly, this is a recurring type of behavior from the Chinese. We used to see this back in the Cold War with the Russians, and the Chinese have taken this right out of the Russian playbook, and they're doing it regularly, not just with the Americans, not just with us, but with a number of their neighbors in the region. And basically they're bullying and provoking reactions to say that these are their waters and that we shouldn't be there. And it is unprofessional because at those speeds with the size of those ships,
Yeah, trying to start something. I guess this is going to be regular war tensions between China and USA. This is from Global News. And this is really, this is like an escalation kind of. Seems to be more of an escalation. It's like Russia and USA. There's escalation there. All these wars are being ramped up. I mean, it's not a war yet here, but could be soon in the future.
You're talking hundreds of people here, their safety is potentially at risk, and it just, you're going to provoke an incident, and who knows where it goes from there.
What does he have to do to not slam into the Chinese ship?
He would have either stopped his engines or potentially gone astern, in essence, hit the brakes, and allow the ship to pass ahead more safely. And these are the kinds of things that, when I come back to why this is so dangerous, that
So
you shouldn't have to make those types.
He probably slowed down. That's what he did, most likely. slow down his boat. I would think, I guess. Or maybe, yeah.
Of emergency maneuvers, but he would have been watching it, tracking it on radar, the number of visual cues that they can use to see whether is it closing on a steady bearing, or is it moving right? Well, exactly, is it going to hit them? It would have been, I won't say pandemonium, but there would have been a lot of tension on the bridge, absolutely. And the collision was avoided, but not because of the provocation of the Chinese, but because it would appear the actions of the American captain.
How common is it for it to escalate to that level versus kind of what we saw throughout the deployment, which was a Chinese ship about a kilometer away, kind of shadowing to this sudden interception?
Yeah, so it's not that common, and that's why this is worthy of note. What I find very interesting is a couple things. First of all, about 10 years ago, the Chinese took a lead role in implementing a series of protocols that are designed to de-escalate these very types of circumstances with a whole series of
Really? Okay.
Western Pacific navies, and a number of these communications that you're referring to were put into a code book, in essence. You would call, and the idea was to prevent the incident, not to provide a mechanism by which you could escalate the situation, which is what we appear to be seeing here. And as far as the maneuvering itself is concerned, I mean, the speed, I think, is obvious in the video. And the second thing is that from a purely nautical rules of the road perspective, the Chinese are crossing from left to right. If you remember driver's ed, if you come to a four-way intersection, you always yield to the vessel or the car on your right. That's exactly where the rule comes from. So they were at fault for a couple of reasons. And then the allegation or the assertion.
I didn't know that. Really? Interesting.
That they're in Chinese territorial waters, so that's a whole other angle to this story.
Well, and that kind of goes
There's
to
a kind of a dispute there. That's a dispute. There might be, or might be, to look into that. I don't know if that case, we were in Chinese waters. U.S. will say one thing and then, who knows? But how could you believe the U.S. side? Sometimes you can't believe the U.S. side. Seems like the U.S. also want to escalate this, not just China. So I don't know.
The why we're doing this. When we were invited aboard, the Navy told us that they would be sailing with an American ship, and that's because there is now a policy that no Allied ship sails alone through the Strait of Taiwan, because there is concern. When we're conducting these crossings, what is the purpose? What is the message that Canada and the United States were trying to send to China?
Yeah, so the Americans call this freedom of navigation, and it really goes back to the international rules of the road for vessels at sea, and the fact that despite the Chinese claim that the Strait of Taiwan is Chinese territorial waters, and that goes to the history and the politics of Taiwan, the reality is that it is international waters. It's well over 100 kilometers across, and they're...
Okay, so apparently that Straits of this was in the Straits of Taiwan. So that means this is according to him, and that area is international waters. If that's the case, then the U.S. has a right to go. The ship has a right to be there. So they don't have an argument is not valid then. If that is the Straits of China, I guess. But apparently he's saying that it is. I guess.
Claiming
the
that
Straits of Taiwan.
It's contiguous to Chinese territory, and therefore they are asserting that they have an exclusive monopoly over what goes on inside those waters, and it's completely false. And the reason why freedom of navigation exercises are very important is that they demonstrate the fact that under international law, naval vessels like the American destroyer and Canadian frigate Montreal are more than able to transit through waters if they're going from A to B, and that this demonstrates to the Chinese, much to their annoyance, that their claim is completely false and not supported by the international community.
Now, you will always hear from on the internet sort of these phantom accounts.
Also Canadian ships in China. The frigate Montreal, the frigate, Canada has a boat, frigate boat there, frigate. They travel so the so I don't know if they're doing like the destroyers doing like an escort to the Canadian, like the escorting the I don't know, the boat, the frigate. But not just so maybe that's why. Let me see what they say.
Accounts that pop up on Twitter and say, if this was off the coast of Vancouver, Canada would do the same thing. Explain to us the difference here.
Yeah, so I was thinking of that earlier today. So imagine, perhaps easier on the East Coast, if we were to imagine the straits between Newfoundland and Cape Breton Island being roughly the same size, and we were to make a claim that this was territorial waters, when in fact it's not. It's not an issue of whether we could make the claim and assert the claim, is would we go to such provocative measures as to not deny somebody access to those waters? Yeah, and no, of course we wouldn't. This goes to the concept of the right of innocent passage, which is what freedom of navigation is all about. And it is important that the United States and the Allies, which is why we don't go alone, to demonstrate that it's not just the United States that's making these counterclaims against China, that it is the international community. And it's important that we be able to demonstrate that they do.
Sorry, so they have a witness on the boat. They send a journalist on there so they could witness it. I guess, yeah. It's trying to make a claim. There's cameras there. They witness it. The journalists, the international journalists, could be from Canada or US, and they could tell it's on camera, it's filmed. You're not making it, so they won't make up. Well, they won't make up stuff. So, okay.
Not control those waters. They are not Chinese waters, and that those have deeper implications in terms of the sovereignty of Taiwan.
China has become more aggressive in the area, in the air, on the sea, trying to push back, especially Western militaries. Canada has said that we are dedicated to implementing this Indo-Pacific strategy, and a huge component of it is naval. Very, very large, because that is really where a lot of this is unfolding. There's concerns about freedom of navigation. And then I hear from sailors who tell me that their ships are in disrepair, that they are struggling to be able to deploy, that there often aren't enough sailors on a ship to be able to send it out with its original component. They have to pull sailors from other ships. The Navy has now brought in this policy that you can join for a year and then leave if you want, because they're so desperate for people. Do we have the ability with our current personnel and ships to be able to implement the vision the government has for the Indo-Pacific and to be a player in this area?
Yeah, I think there's some serious challenges as you've laid them out, and I think the human dimension of this is a key component. Not only are there structural shortages in the current fleet from a sailor's perspective, but also as you look to grow the fleet, recruiting is a key part of that. Retention obviously is a challenge, and you know the bottom line is I'm not sure whether we can get there or not, but I'd rather try to get there and fail than admit at the front that it's all too difficult and that it's not worth trying. And I think that's kind of unfortunately where we find ourselves, and there's a variety of reasons why we are where we are. But you know, this is why you're seeing a frigate deploying from a Halifax base to go into the Pacific. That would have been unusual. There's capacity issues related to.
So we're sending, Canada, we're sending Canadian frigates in the Chinese Strait, and Taiwan Strait, sorry. Interested. And I guess American, and there's, maybe they're being, along with, we're partnering with the American destroyers there. They're doing like exercises in the waters, naval exercises in the Taiwan Strait. That's what they're doing along with the Taiwanese. And interesting.
both the crewing and the material condition of the existing fleet, which is why building the new ships is important, as quickly as possible. And you're looking at 35-year-old ships at the moment that are getting harder and harder to keep running.
Admiral Mark Norman, thank you so much for joining us today and for your insight and explaining what we're seeing here and what's going on.
Thank you, Mercedes, for your interest again. Yeah.
Okay, folks, that's about it. Kind of a breaking news update, kind of. This was like it's June 4th, but this haven't happened yesterday. Actually, in China, in the late afternoon yesterday, the time difference, but and this looks like I don't know, worrisome. More and more like World War III maybe happening, and I don't know, maybe in 4 or 5 years, you see China and Russia haven't collaborated yet, but we shall see. They might. Then you have the Middle East. What's going on there? I showed you the Turkey and the elections. And that's another thing going on there. It's gonna be involved with. Might be involved with the war, the next World War. Maybe a whole lot of countries in this. Wow. And this is just the start, the very start of essence of this. The start. Chico, stuff you see here, I don't know. But that's about it, folks. We'll catch you on the next post or video. Hello.